In 1453 AD, Constantinople remained the principal city of the Byzantine Empire, serving simultaneously as its political center, economic hub, and religious capital. Founded in 330 AD by Emperor Constantine I, Constantinople had been developed on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium, occupying a commanding position along the Straits of the Bosporus, which connected the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara and the wider Mediterranean. By the mid-15th century AD, Constantinople was the last stronghold of the Byzantine state, which had once controlled large swathes of the eastern Mediterranean and parts of the Balkans. Despite its reduced territorial holdings, the city retained monumental fortifications and a position of immense strategic significance, both geographically and symbolically. The physical defenses of Constantinople were renowned for their sophistication and resilience. The Theodosian Walls, constructed under Emperor Theodosius II in the early 5th century AD, formed a multi-layered system of fortifications stretching approximately 6.5 kilometers along the city's western and northern approaches. These consisted of a double line of walls with an intervening moat, high towers at regular intervals, and extensive battlements capable of housing archers, infantry, and artillery. Combined with the city's natural defenses, the Golden Horn to the north, the Sea of Marmara to the south, and the Bosporus to the east, the fortifications rendered Constantinople highly defensible. This combination of artificial and natural barriers had enabled the city to resist numerous sieges across the preceding centuries, including attacks by Avar, Slavic, Arab, and later Ottoman forces. By 1453 AD, however, the city's defenses faced unprecedented challenges from emerging military technologies and the expansionist policies of the Ottoman Empire. By the early 15th century AD, the Byzantine Empire had experienced a prolonged period of decline. The territorial extent of the state had contracted considerably due to the combined effects of internal political instability, dynastic disputes, economic contraction, and external pressures from Ottoman expansion. Once a dominant Mediterranean power, Byzantium by this period retained only Constantinople and a few surrounding territories, including parts of the Morea, the Peloponnesus, and small fortresses in Thrace. The loss of peripheral provinces had significant consequences for the city's ability to sustain itself in terms of manpower, agricultural production, and access to trade routes. While Constantinople continued to function as a commercial and cultural center, it was heavily dependent on imports of food, weaponry, and material support, both from its remaining territories and from limited Western European aid. The Ottoman Empire, meanwhile, had risen as a regional power throughout the 14th and early 15th centuries AD. By 1453 AD, under the leadership of Sultan Mehmed II, the Ottomans had consolidated control over much of Anatolia, the Balkans, and the remaining territories surrounding Constantinople. Mehmed II, who assumed the throne in 1451 AD, pursued a policy aimed at the full incorporation of Constantinople into the Ottoman dominion, both as a strategic acquisition and as a demonstration of Ottoman sovereignty over the eastern Mediterranean. The city's capture was viewed as essential to Ottoman control of maritime trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and to the projection of Ottoman authority into southeastern Europe. In preparation for the forthcoming confrontation, both the Byzantine defenders and the Ottomans engaged in extensive logistical and military preparations. The Byzantines, under Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, organized the city's remaining armed forces, repaired and reinforced key sections of the Theodosian Walls, and mobilized available citizen militias. Western European support was minimal and inconsistent, with Venice and Genoa contributing limited naval and mercenary contingents, while appeals to the papacy and other European rulers produced only symbolic commitments of aid. The demographic composition of Constantinople at this time was also a factor. Estimates suggest that the population had declined from its peak in earlier centuries to roughly 50,000 to 60,000 residents, including civilian soldiers and mercenaries, reflecting both attrition due to warfare and economic migration. The city's strategic position along the Bosporus was a focal point of the conflict. Control of the straits meant access to critical supply lines from the Black Sea and facilitated Ottoman naval operations. The Golden Horn, a sheltered inlet north of the city, was protected by a massive chain designed to prevent enemy ships from entering, allowing the Byzantines to retain some control over maritime access. On the landward side, the Theodosian Walls remained a formidable obstacle. The walls were constructed with two parallel ramparts, the inner wall reaching approximately 12 meters in height, and the outer wall about 8 meters, interspersed with towers capable of supporting crossfire and artillery positions. A deep moat further reinforced the land defenses, and the city's gates, such as the Edirne Gate and the Golden Gate, were heavily fortified and historically difficult to breach. Despite these structural advantages, Constantinople faced significant challenges that affected its defensive capacity. Military innovations in siege warfare, particularly the use of large artillery such as bombards capable of firing massive stone projectiles, had begun to render traditional fortifications more vulnerable. Sultan Mehmed II's forces included engineers capable of deploying such artillery, which allowed them to target specific weak points in the walls with sustained bombardment. Furthermore, the limited size of the defending force, coupled with the city's reliance on irregular militias and foreign mercenaries, meant that constant vigilance along multiple fronts was required to maintain control over the walls, gates, and naval approaches simultaneously. The economic and logistical context of Constantinople also contributed to the complexity of the forthcoming siege. The city relied heavily on imported grain and supplies from the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Ottoman control over the surrounding territories increasingly restricted access to these routes, placing the city under pressure to manage scarce resources effectively. Defenders constructed barricades, stockpiled supplies, and organized rationing systems in anticipation of a prolonged conflict. Historical accounts indicate that the Byzantines were acutely aware of the insufficiency of their resources compared to the size and preparedness of the Ottoman army, which contemporary sources estimate at approximately 80,000 to 100,000 troops, including infantry, cavalry, and artillery specialists. The Byzantine defenders, by contrast, numbered approximately 7,000 to 10,000 combatants, including the city's regular troops, armed citizen militias, and mercenary contingents from Genoa and Venice. The symbolic importance of Constantinople extended beyond its military or economic value. The city represented the continuity of the Roman imperial tradition in the East and served as the center of the Orthodox Christian Church. Its fall would signify not only the end of the Byzantine state, but also a major shift in the balance of power between Christian Europe and the expanding Ottoman Muslim Empire. Consequently, the defense of the city was approached not merely as a tactical or strategic operation, but as an endeavor with profound historical and cultural implications. The stage for the siege of Constantinople was thus established in the early months of 1453 AD. Sultan Mehmed II positioned his forces around the city, establishing encampments along the land approaches, constructing siege works, and preparing artillery capable of sustained bombardment. The Byzantines fortified key sections of the Theodosian Walls, reinforced the gates, and maintained constant patrols and watch systems along the walls to detect and repel any Ottoman probes or assaults. Naval operations also became a critical aspect of the preparations, with the chain across the Golden Horn and the limited Venetian and Genoese ships deployed to defend the city from maritime incursions. By the early 1400s AD, the Byzantine Empire had reached a point where its borders no longer resembled the territorial expanse known in earlier centuries. Its authority was confined primarily to Constantinople, a few territories in the Peloponnese, and scattered holdings around the Aegean. The political landscape that developed from the late 1420s AD to 1452 AD provides the factual context that explains why the city stood vulnerable when the Ottoman offensive materialized. This period is defined by documented diplomatic records, imperial correspondence, Venetian and Genoese archives, and Ottoman administrative chronicles. After the death of Manuel II Palaiologos in 1425 AD, governance passed to his son, John VIII Palaiologos. During his reign, from 1425 AD to 1448 AD, the empire continued its long-standing pattern of diplomatic negotiation with Western European powers, the papacy, and the maritime republics. These records show a persistent attempt to secure military support through church union efforts, military alliances, or financial pledges. John VIII's attendance at the Council of Florence in 1438 to 1439 AD is not a matter of interpretation. The council's formal acts document the Byzantine delegation's negotiations with the Latin Church. The Byzantine emperor signed the Decree of Union on July 6, 1439 AD, with the intention of securing Western military assistance. Yet, despite the formal agreement, the anticipated military support did not materialize in the quantity or speed required to counter the rising Ottoman power. Parallel to these diplomatic exchanges, Ottoman growth under Murad II, r. 1421 to 1451 AD, moved steadily. Ottoman military registers describe systematic consolidation of territory across the Balkans. Selanik fell in 1430 AD. Serbian territories were progressively absorbed, and control over the Dardanelles allowed the Ottomans to regulate maritime access between the Aegean and the Sea of Marmara. Reports from Venetian captains and Genoese colonial officials confirm that Ottoman oversight of regional trade routes increased significantly in these decades. Every recorded expansion altered the geopolitical conditions in which Constantinople existed. By the 1440s AD, the empire was effectively enclosed. The land approaches to the city were controlled by Ottoman garrisons stationed in Thrace, particularly at Edirne, which served as the Ottoman administrative center in Europe. Ottoman tax registers, along with travelers' accounts, indicate that Thrace's agricultural output and population base could support repeated military deployments. Constantinople possessed neither the manpower nor the territorial depth to counter such logistical advantages. In 1444 AD, the Crusade of Varna attempted to challenge Ottoman consolidation. Its outcome, documented in Hungarian, Polish, Venetian, and Ottoman sources, was decisive. On November 10, 1444 AD, Ottoman forces led by Murad II defeated the crusading army at Varna on the western coast of the Black Sea. The defeat eliminated the last significant Western effort to reverse Ottoman control of the Balkans. After Varna, Byzantine diplomatic sources record a clear shift. Correspondence from the emperor emphasized the need to repair fortifications and secure supplies, recognizing that Western intervention could no longer be expected at scale. Following the defeat at Varna, Murad II led another successful campaign, culminating in the Battle of Kosovo in 1448 AD. This further solidified Ottoman authority in the Balkans. When John VIII died in 1448 AD, his brother Constantine XI Palaiologos ascended the throne, becoming the final Byzantine emperor. The transition is documented in imperial registers and confirmed by Western envoys present in the region. Constantine XI had served as despot of the Morea, and his administrative actions there are well attested in Venetian and Byzantine documents. His experience in local governance, fortification management, and military logistics became relevant as the empire entered its final years. Between 1449 AD and 1451 AD, Constantine's correspondence with Genoa, Venice, and the papacy followed a clear theme: requests for financial assistance, military aid, and naval reinforcements. Venetian archives contain repeated petitions from the emperor requesting grain shipments and technical support for fortifications. The Genoese, primarily concerned with protecting their commercial colonies in Galata, maintained limited cooperation, often defined by trade agreements rather than strategic commitment. Their defensive posture, documented in contracts and local administrative notes, reveals that they prepared for the possibility of Ottoman action but avoided direct entanglement. The turning point in the city's strategic condition occurred in 1451 AD with the death of Murad II and the accession of Mehmed II, who began his second reign at the age of 19. This event is fully documented in Ottoman imperial registers. Mehmed's first reign, 1444 to 1446 AD, had been brief and interrupted by Murad's return, but contemporary chronicles confirm that he used that period to study state administration, siege technology, and regional geopolitical patterns. When he resumed the Sultanate in 1451 AD, he inherited a structurally consolidated empire with the administrative depth to sustain a major campaign. Mehmed's early actions in 1451 to 1452 AD signaled a decisive shift. Byzantine envoys sent to congratulate the new sultan recorded that he appeared cordial at first, maintaining treaties established under Murad II. However, subsequent Ottoman decisions documented in imperial decrees and construction records demonstrate that preparations for a major military action began almost immediately. One of the most consequential steps was the construction of Ramilai Hizari on the European side of the Bosporus, directly across from the older Anadolu Hizari. The construction began in April 1452 AD and was completed by August 1452 AD, an unusually rapid pace confirmed by Ottoman building registers and eyewitness accounts. This fortification allowed the Ottomans to control maritime movement through the Bosporus, a critical supply line for Constantinople, especially for ships traveling from Genoese-controlled ports in the Black Sea. The strategic impact of Ramilai Hizari is documented by incidents that occurred during its construction and after its completion. Byzantine and Venetian records note several seizures of ships, including a Venetian vessel whose captain was executed for violating the Sultan's new regulations. These events demonstrate, not interpret, that Mehmed II intended to isolate the city economically and militarily. Inside the city, administrative records and correspondence reveal the state of Constantinople's defenses during these final years. The Theodosian Walls remained formidable in structure, but maintenance had been inconsistent. Available imperial budgets from the 1440s AD show limited funds for fortification repair, and Constantinople's population had declined dramatically from its medieval peak. Reports from Western envoys estimate the population at around 50,000 by the mid-1400s AD, though some place it even lower. This reduced population affected the city's ability to defend its extensive walls, which required thousands of soldiers for full operational capacity. The empire's financial status was no stronger. Tax income from the Peloponnese remained inconsistent, and the emperor often relied on loans from Venetian and Genoese merchants. The Patriarchate's position had also been weakened. The union signed at the Council of Florence in 1439 AD had been formally recognized within the city only in December 1452 AD, under pressure to secure Western support. Records of the ceremony, performed by Cardinal Isidore of Kiev, confirm the event, but they also show that it produced little tangible military benefit. By late 1452 AD, Mehmed II completed preparations for a military campaign. Ottoman chronicles record the assembly of artillery, including the large bombards cast by the engineer Orban. The construction and testing of these guns are documented in both Ottoman and Byzantine contemporary accounts. These bombards represented a technological advancement capable of damaging the Theodosian Walls more efficiently than older siege methods. Simultaneously, Ottoman forces were mobilized across Thrace. Contemporary reports describe the movement of infantry, cavalry, and logistical support units. These deployments were made possible by the empire's administrative structure, which recorded land allocations, timars, linked to military service. This system allowed rapid mobilization when the Sultan issued a campaign order. Throughout 1452 AD and into early 1453 AD, Constantinople's envoys continued diplomatic efforts. Letters were sent to Venice, the papacy, and various Italian city-states requesting reinforcements. Venetian records note the deliberations of the Senate, where debates focused on the cost of intervention, competing maritime priorities, and the risk of provoking Ottoman retaliation. Genoa's position remained tied to protecting its trade colonies rather than committing to a large-scale military effort. By early 1453 AD, the geopolitical conditions were fixed. The Byzantine Empire lacked the manpower, financial stability, and international alliances needed to withstand a prolonged assault. The Ottoman Empire possessed the administrative capacity, military technology, and territorial depth to conduct a comprehensive siege. These conditions were the product of the preceding decades and are verified across multiple archival sources. With these developments, the stage was set for the final Ottoman advance toward Constantinople, which began in the early months of 1453 AD. The documented movements of Mehmed II's forces, along with preparations inside the city, define the transition from political buildup to active siege operations. By the beginning of 1453 AD, every available record, from Venetian Senate minutes to Ottoman campaign registers, indicates that Mehmed II's preparations for a full-scale offensive were complete. The Ottoman administration issued directives across Thrace for the gathering of soldiers, engineers, and logistical personnel. These orders appear in several provincial registers that document Timar holders assembling according to the standard obligations tied to land tenure. The empire's administrative capacity ensured timely mobilization, enabling Mehmed II to concentrate forces for the campaign. The final stages of artillery preparation were recorded in both Byzantine and Ottoman sources. Orban, the Hungarian or Transylvanian engineer who had offered his services to the Byzantines before joining the Ottoman court, supervised casting operations in Edirne. Reports from Kritovalos of Imbris and the later Ottoman chronicles state that a massive bombardment, capable of firing stone projectiles weighing several hundred kilograms, was completed and tested in early 1453 AD. Its transportation from Edirne to Constantinople required teams of oxen, specialized wagons, and engineering crews. Along the route, local Ottoman officials recorded requisition orders for food and materials, confirming the logistical scale of this movement. Inside Constantinople, the Emperor Constantine XI continued to reorganize the city's defenses. The defensive strategy was based on the established structure of the Theodosian Walls, comprising a moat, outer wall, and inner wall. Contemporary reports from Venetian and Genoese observers detail the repair of weak sections, the distribution of defenders, and the reinforcement of battlements. Byzantine military forces within the city were limited. Surviving records estimate roughly 5,000 to 7,000 Byzantine soldiers, supplemented by approximately 2,000 foreign defenders, including Genoese troops under the command of Giovanni Giustiniani Longo. Giustiniani's arrival is documented in Genoese administrative papers, which outline the terms of his service and the equipment he brought. As the city prepared, the Ottomans concentrated their forces around Edirne. Ottoman chronicles and Western observers placed the total ranging between 60,000 and 80,000 personnel, including infantry, cavalry, artillery crews, engineers, and logistical workers. Precise figures vary across sources, but all document a force significantly larger than Constantinople's defensive capacity. The composition included janissaries, Timarite cavalry, irregular infantry, azaps, and auxiliary units drawn from vassal territories. This structure is confirmed in detailed military registers from the period. By March 1453 AD, the Ottoman army began its movement toward Constantinople. Reports from Genoese merchants stationed in Galata recorded sightings of marching units, engineers, and supply caravans. These observations match Ottoman chronicles that describe the army's progression from Edirne along established military roads. The logistical structure ensured the transport of food, timber, siege material, gunpowder components, primarily saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, and medical supplies. Artillery movement occurred simultaneously. The large bombard, accompanied by smaller cannon, moved at a slower pace due to weight and mechanical constraints. Ottoman sources describe daily progress measured in short distances, halting whenever terrain required reinforcement or when bridges needed temporary modification. Each halt is recorded with notes documenting local requisitions for timber and draft animals. During this period, the Emperor Constantine XI maintained diplomatic communication with external powers. Letters dated early 1453 AD were sent to Venice, Genoa, the Pope, and various Italian states. These letters outlined the Ottoman approach and requested immediate reinforcements. The Venetian Senate deliberated several times in early 1453 AD, as preserved in their official minutes. While Venice agreed in principle to send ships, the records show logistical delays and competing priorities. Genoa prepared defensive measures for its colonies in the Black Sea and the Aegean, but did not commit large-scale forces. Papal correspondence confirms that a small contingent, led by Cardinal Isidore of Kiev, had already arrived in the city, but no substantial reinforcements were dispatched. The final Ottoman approach brought the army into the plains west of Constantinople in early April 1453 AD. Multiple eyewitness accounts, Byzantine, Genoese, and Venetian, confirmed that by April 2nd to 5th, the main body of Mehmed's forces had arrived. The Ottomans began establishing their encampments along the land walls, spreading from the Golden Horn in the north to the Sea of Marmara in the south. The positioning corresponded to standard Ottoman siege doctrine, placing infantry and artillery opposite the most accessible sections of the Theodosian Walls. Mehmed II established his command position near the Lycus Valley, facing the central stretch of the walls, which was considered the most direct route for a breach. This location is attested in several independent accounts, all of which place the Sultan's command structure in the same general area. Engineers and artillery officers began surveying the terrain to determine firing positions. Ottoman administrative documents record allocation of supplies, powder reserves, and rations, confirming coordinated logistical planning. Before full siege operations commenced, Mehmed II conducted one final diplomatic action. Ottoman and Byzantine sources agree that he sent a formal demand to the emperor offering terms that involved the surrender of the city in exchange for the emperor's personal safety and the continuation of Eastern Orthodox religious practices. The emperor rejected these terms. This exchange is well documented and requires no interpretation. It is recorded across multiple primary sources with consistent details. After the refusal, preparations for the initial bombardment continued without interruption. Meanwhile, inside the city, defensive assignments were finalized. Records from eyewitnesses such as George Francis and the historian Doukas note the distribution of key figures along the walls. Emperor Constantine XI positioned himself near the central sector, sharing responsibility with Giustiniani. Venetian and Genoese units were stationed along various sectors based on their commanders' agreements with the emperor. Because the city lacked adequate numbers, every available defender, including Byzantine citizens, foreign soldiers, and volunteers, was assigned to specific sectors. Naval defenses remained concentrated in the Golden Horn, protected by the large chain barrier documented in both Byzantine and Genoese records. This chain prevented the entry of enemy ships and had been employed during earlier sieges in previous centuries. The Golden Horn's defensive configuration played a significant role in the early weeks of the siege. Genoese ships from Galata, although officially neutral, were required by mutual agreements to maintain a level of non-interference with Constantinople's defensive activities. Genoese commercial records from Galata indicate that the colony adopted a cautious stance, aiming to remain neutral while preparing for possible conflict. By early April 1453 AD, the Ottomans established artillery batteries facing the land walls. Locations included the Lycus Valley and several points north and south along the wall. Smaller artillery pieces supplemented the main bombard. Ottoman chronicles specify the number and type of guns deployed: large stone-throwing bombards for breaching walls and smaller cannons for targeting defenders and defensive structures. The positioning required excavation, reinforcement of firing platforms with timber, and the placement of powder magazines. These logistical details appear in both Ottoman and European accounts. The first Ottoman artillery fire began in early April, variously dated between April 6th and April 7th, 1453 AD, depending on the source. The bombardment targeted the central section of the Theodosian Walls, particularly the area around the Gate of St. Romanos. The impact of these early bombardments was recorded by multiple observers, who described damage to the outer wall and battlements. Though the initial damage was not decisive, it represented a new phase of siege warfare, as earlier medieval siege engines had been unable to inflict comparable structural impact. The Byzantines responded with continuous repairs. Records from France's note nightly efforts to rebuild damaged sections using timber, earth, and available stones. Venetian accounts confirm these activities and note shortages of materials, including iron clamps and sufficient quantities of lime for mortar. Despite limited resources, the defenders maintained a consistent pattern of repair, delaying structural collapse. Ottoman forces also began trenching operations, digging zigzag trenches to approach the walls without exposing soldiers to defensive fire. These techniques are recorded in Ottoman engineering manuals and confirmed by Western accounts describing the progress of these trenches. The Ottomans used shields, wooden screens, and earthworks to protect their sappers. The Byzantines countered with sorties and defensive artillery fire, attempting to disrupt these advancements. Naval preparations were underway simultaneously. Ottoman fleet records confirm that ships from Gallipoli and other naval stations were assembled and moved toward the Bosporus and Sea of Marmara. Estimates placed the fleet at approximately 100 to 120 ships of varying sizes, including transports, light galleys, and auxiliary vessels. Their mission was to blockade the city from the sea, restrict movement through the Bosporus, and support coastal operations. The Byzantine navy, reduced to a few dozen ships, relied heavily on Venetian and Genoese vessels within the city. While these events unfolded, observers documented a final significant Ottoman action: the transport of ships overland into the Golden Horn. Planning for this maneuver began in early April 1453 AD and is documented in Ottoman administrative orders. The process would be executed later in the siege, but originated in this early phase, when the Ottomans assessed the impossibility of forcing naval entry past the chain. As the Ottoman siege machinery moved into position in early April 1453 AD, Constantinople's internal structure, command hierarchy, and leadership under Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos were already defined by months of preparation. To understand the city's capacity to withstand the impending assault, contemporary letters, eyewitness accounts, and administrative records provide a clear picture of the emperor's actions and the condition of the population in the months leading up to the final siege. Constantine XI had been proclaimed emperor in 1449 AD, and his accession was recorded by multiple Byzantine sources, including George Francis, who details the political circumstances following the death of his brother, Emperor John VIII. When Constantine assumed power, the empire had already contracted to its smallest territorial footprint in history. The city of Constantinople itself, a few outposts in the Peloponnese, and scattered islands under loose Byzantine authority. The emperor's administrative work during 1452 AD and early 1453 AD was shaped by this restricted domain. Throughout 1452 AD, Constantine XI supervised the strengthening of the city's defenses. Eyewitness writings document his inspection of the Theodosian Walls, coordination of repair efforts, and assessment of weak sections, particularly the central area around the Gate of St. Romanos, where earlier sieges had caused significant structural strain. Francis and Doukas both record the emperor's involvement in these activities, indicating a hands-on role in fortification management rather than a symbolic presence. By late 1452 AD, the emperor faced a series of material constraints. Byzantine administrative records confirm shortages in several critical categories: iron clamps for reinforcing masonry, timber for hoardings, spare artillery projectiles, and adequate quantities of lime for mortar. Venetian sources describe additional shortages in naval stores, including limited repair materials for ships and insufficient rope reserves. These limitations shaped the defensive strategy that would later become central to the city's resistance. Although Constantine XI maintained diplomatic communication with European powers throughout 1452 AD, documentation from Venice, Rome, and Genoa shows the same outcome: expressions of support without large-scale substantive aid. Papal letters confirm ongoing negotiations regarding ecclesiastical union between Eastern and Western churches, but the political realities in Italy, competing wars, internal financial constraints, and naval commitments meant reinforcements would not arrive in time. This is reflected in official Venetian Senate minutes from late 1452 AD, which detail lengthy debates but no rapid mobilization. In November 1452 AD, Giovanni Giustiniani Longo arrived in Constantinople. His identity and mission are confirmed by Genoese administrative archives and the testimony of Byzantine chroniclers. Giustiniani was an experienced soldier from Chios, and he brought with him a contingent of well-trained troops and specialized equipment. His agreement with the emperor granted him command over key defensive sectors of the land walls, particularly the central region behind the Lycus Valley. The arrival of this contingent is one of the best documented events of the period due to simultaneous accounts from Byzantine, Genoese, and Venetian writers. Giustiniani's troops provided much-needed reinforcement, but their numbers were limited. Estimates from the period place his force at a few hundred disciplined soldiers equipped with contemporary armor and crossbows. Their presence significantly strengthened the defensive capability of the central wall section. His arrival also marked a shift in the organization of the city's military structure. Constantine XI formally assigned Giustiniani joint oversight of the most vulnerable sector, and Byzantine sources specifically note the emperor's reliance on him for the coordination of land defense. The emperor also reorganized the remaining Byzantine troops, numbering approximately 5,000, according to contemporary observers. This figure encompasses trained soldiers, palace guards, urban militia, and volunteers. Foreign defenders within the city, beyond the Genoese troops, included small Venetian detachments and various independent individuals from other Italian regions. Their presence is recorded in Venetian naval logs and several eyewitness narratives preserved in later manuscripts. While their numbers were small, their maritime experience strengthened the city's naval defense. The population of Constantinople in 1453 AD was considerably reduced from earlier centuries. Although exact figures are not available, contemporary descriptions indicate a city with large empty districts, abandoned houses, and a diminished economic base. The emperor, therefore, had fewer civilian laborers available for the continuous repairs required during the siege. This shortage appears repeatedly in the writings of Francis, who notes the difficulty of maintaining adequate repair shifts at night. During late 1452 AD, Constantine XI also supervised the preparation of the Golden Horn defenses. The placement of the chain across the harbor is well documented by Genoese observers, who describe the mechanisms controlling its ends, including pontoons and anchoring points. This chain had successfully prevented naval incursions in earlier centuries and was considered a central defensive feature. Ships within the harbor, Byzantine, Venetian, and Genoese, were positioned strategically to respond to Ottoman naval activity. The emperor reviewed these preparations, according to several accounts, and assigned naval commanders based on their vessels' capacities and cruise experience. In December 1452 AD and January 1453 AD, a final round of internal fortification work took place. Several eyewitness accounts describe how citizens and soldiers participated in clearing debris, reinforcing towers, and stockpiling stones for defensive use. Constantine XI issued directives regarding the collection and distribution of remaining grain supplies, which are mentioned in a few surviving administrative notes and later chronicled by Doukas. These measures aimed to ensure that food reserves could sustain the city through a prolonged siege. Throughout this period, the emperor continued to monitor the Ottoman movements across the Bosporus and in Thrace. Reports arrived regularly from scouts and messengers. Venetian and Genoese merchants in the region also provided information, some of which appears in their surviving letters and consular notes. These reports described Ottoman construction at Rumeli Hizari, completed earlier in 1452 AD, which played a crucial role in controlling traffic through the Bosporus. The fortress's construction is meticulously recorded in both Ottoman and Byzantine accounts, and its presence demonstrated Mehmed II's strategic intent. Constantine XI's leadership during the months preceding the siege is consistently described by contemporaries as direct and practical rather than ceremonial. Nearly every account places him present at strategic meetings, defensive inspections, and diplomatic discussions. His approach during this period is documented factually through eyewitness testimony rather than interpreted motivations. By February and March 1453 AD, preparations within the city reached their final phase. The emperor oversaw the organization of defensive personnel along the walls. The central sector, extending from the Gate of Chrysius to the Sea of Marmara, required the greatest concentration of forces due to the terrain and historical vulnerabilities. Giustiniani assumed operational control of this sector, while Constantine XI coordinated the overall defensive strategy. Standard Byzantine military protocol was still in effect, despite the empire's reduced size. Commanders received defined sectors, defenders were assigned in proportion to expected threats, and reserves were stationed in key interior positions. Several Byzantine officers, including Andronikos Kantakazinos and other local commanders, are mentioned in surviving records. Their specific assignments illustrate the organizational structure leading up to April 1453 AD. Religious services continued throughout this preparatory period, documented in clerical writings and letters, but they form no part of the defensive strategy and require no interpretation in the context of recorded military events. What can be stated from the records is simply that Constantinople maintained its standard ecclesiastical schedule and that clergy were present during important administrative decisions due to their normal roles in Byzantine governance. As March turned to April 1453 AD, final information regarding the approaching Ottoman army reached the city. Merchants arriving from the Black Sea and the Aegean brought details of troop movements, ship deployments, and artillery transport. These reports were relayed to the emperor and recorded in letters sent to the Italian states. Although these letters requested urgent assistance, archival evidence from Venice and Genoa confirms that neither republic was capable of immediate intervention. On April 2nd to 5th, 1453 AD, Ottoman vanguard units began appearing before the land walls. Several eyewitnesses described the sighting of cavalry units, engineers, and small infantry detachments. These observations align with Ottoman sources describing the standard deployment order, which placed irregular troops and engineering teams at the front, followed by the main infantry forces and artillery. The emperor and his commanders inspected these movements from the battlements, according to Byzantine accounts. When the Ottomans established their first camp positions, Constantine XI finalized the internal defensive arrangement. Units were assigned to towers, wall segments, gatehouses, and inner positions. Reserves were placed in the interior streets leading to the central walls. The emperor assigned himself to the area near the gate of St. Romanos, a location confirmed in multiple independent accounts. The final weeks before the fall of Constantinople in May 1453 AD unfolded with movements and decisions documented across both Byzantine and Ottoman sources, and these records show how the tightening Ottoman system around the capital made the city's outcome increasingly predictable. After the first major bombardments in early April, Mehmed II adjusted his logistical and military arrangements to keep pressure consistently applied along the land walls while preparing the final steps needed for a conclusive assault. By mid-April 1453 AD, the Ottoman gun crews were fully synchronized with infantry rotations in a coordinated routine described by Critibolos of Imbris. The large cannons, particularly the massive bombard positioned opposite the gate of St. Romanos, were fired at intervals long enough to cool the barrels but frequent enough to maintain structural fatigue in the walls. Ottoman sappers simultaneously advanced trenches toward the central sections of the Theodosian Walls. According to Doukas, trenches extended so close to the outer wall that by late April, defenders could throw stones and debris by hand at the approaching miners. The terrain in this section of Constantinople's fortifications made enemy approach hazardous, but the Ottomans maintained a constant labor force drawn from provincial levies and Timerite contingents. Meanwhile, the defenders continued to patch breaches using timber, earth, sacks of wool, and stones taken from damaged internal structures. These repairs, however, increasingly relied on improvised resources since the city had no functioning quarries and a limited supply of workable stone. Letters from Cardinal Isidore, written shortly after his arrival earlier in the siege, described labor shortages and deterioration of defensive positions already weakened by years of poor maintenance before 1453 AD. During this same period, Mehmed II supervised the construction of additional fortifications around his own encampment. Ottoman records, including later compilations by Tursun Beg, outlined defensive trenches, wooden palisades, and artillery placements protecting the main camp from possible sorties by the defenders. The Ottomans maintained strict order. Movement within the camp followed a documented chain of command supervised by officers known as Korbasai and Sabasai, ensuring that supply caravans from Edirne and the Balkan hinterlands reached the front without disruption. To increase naval pressure, the Ottomans expanded their presence in the Golden Horn after hauling ships overland earlier in the siege. Once the vessels were positioned behind the boom chain barrier, Mehmed ordered construction of small docks and platforms along the northern shore to facilitate resupply. Genoese records from Pera, Galata, neutral but commercially entangled with both sides, mention that Ottoman small crafts maneuvered with increasing frequency, escorting transports carrying timber, arrows, and provisions. Despite the steady Ottoman advance, Emperor Constantine XI continued coordinating repairs and distributing troops along the walls. According to Byzantine sources, particularly the accounts preserved by Chalca condyles, the emperor prioritized reinforcing the Lycus Valley section where Giovanni Giustiniani held command. Giustiniani, already injured during earlier exchanges, remained responsible for the most threatened sector. Venetian and Genoese testimonies written after the fall emphasized the importance of his leadership during these final weeks, noting that he organized night patrols and personally inspected breaches. Food conditions inside Constantinople worsened steadily. Contemporary merchant records noted the rapidly increasing prices of grain and necessities. With Ottoman naval control blocking maritime access, internal rationing grew severe. However, the defenders maintained a functional command structure, continuing rotation schedules and repairing damage nightly, as documented by several refugee accounts written shortly after 1453 AD. During the third week of April, Mehmed II intensified mining operations. Ottoman engineers attempted multiple underground tunnels aimed at collapsing portions of the walls. These were countered by Byzantine defensive miners who detected and disrupted several tunnels using auditory detection techniques described in Roman military manuals still referenced by Constantinople's engineers. The defenders flooded tunnels, ignited countermines, or collapsed Ottoman shafts through structural sabotage. The best documented event occurred when a Serbian miner working for the Byzantines destroyed a major Ottoman tunnel by igniting stored oil and timber, killing several Ottoman sappers. Ottoman chronicles acknowledge these setbacks, though they emphasize the continued progress of other mining teams. The siege entered a more regimented phase as May approached. Ottoman artillery crews improved the accuracy of bombardments through adjustments in elevation and powder measurement. Based on surviving Ottoman gunner instructions of the period, compiled into treatises decades later, adjustments to powder quantities and shot alignment allowed the gunners to target specific weakened points on the wall. The gate of Chrysius and the central Lycus section endured repeated bombardment, with large stone balls breaking outer defenses faster than the defenders could reinforce them. At the same time, Mehmed II maintained diplomatic pressure on the defenders. Recorded exchanges mention his offers for the city to surrender under terms that would preserve life and property. These negotiations, however, remained brief and performed more as formalities since Constantine XI refused to concede any surrender guaranteeing the city's transfer. The emperor's responses, preserved in later Byzantine histories but consistent in content across multiple sources, affirmed that he would hold the city as long as possible. Mehmed II, aware of the defenders' instability, resumed full military operations without delay. Inside the city, morale remained functional but strained. Provisions ran low, and the constant need to repair damages stretched manpower. Nevertheless, daily records indicate that religious services continued, not as romanticized accounts later suggested, but as part of the city's administrative routine. Priests and monks assisted in carrying water, earth, and materials for wall repairs. Pressure on the Venetian and Genoese contingents increased as Ottoman ships maneuvered more aggressively in the Golden Horn. Naval engagements remained limited during this stage, but small-scale skirmishes occurred when Byzantine or Allied vessels attempted to reposition. Surviving Venetian letters reference attempts to maintain mobility, though the Ottoman fleet near the boom chain made significant naval breakthroughs impossible. By early May 1453 AD, the continuous artillery bombardment created several recurring breaches. The defenders filled these gaps nightly, but acknowledged in internal communications that structural fatigue accumulated faster than repairs could compensate. Giustiniani's men, supported by Byzantine troops, layered defenses with timber palisades behind the breaches, but these stopgap measures were temporary. Ottoman engineers adjusted artillery positions, moving several guns closer to the walls under protective earthworks. Contemporary accounts highlight that the movement was carried out at night to minimize exposure to Byzantine counterfire. Once repositioned, these cannons increased their firing rate, accelerating the weakening of the outer walls. In mid-May, Mehmed II ordered the construction of a large wooden siege tower. This device, documented in both Ottoman and Italian sources, included protective hides soaked in water to resist fire and was intended to allow Ottoman archers and infantry to attack defenders on the walls at elevated positions. The defenders countered with incendiaries, using Greek fire reserves sparingly due to limited quantities. Several attempts to ignite the tower succeeded partially, but Ottoman crews repaired damage and continued advancing it toward the walls until Byzantine night sorties destroyed its structural integrity. Despite these setbacks, the siege entered its final phase. Ottoman morale remained stable, maintained by systematic distribution of supplies and strict discipline enforced by military police units known as Yasakslar. Pay records show that soldiers received timely wages, and provincial levies rotated to maintain constant pressure. Inside Constantinople, leadership maintained a coordinated defense effort. Constantine XI continued inspecting positions daily and engaged directly with commanders such as Giustiniani, Lucas Notaras, and Venetian captains. The emperor also oversaw the redistribution of increasingly scarce supplies. Records from the city's Latin and Byzantine communities note the growing exhaustion, but also document that defensive formations held order through established command structures. As the days progressed, intercepted Ottoman communications obtained by Byzantine scouts indicated that Mehmed II was preparing for a large coordinated assault. Venetian and Genoese observers noted changes in troop formations, increased movement towards central positions, and expanded artillery activity. The conclusion drawn in contemporary accounts is that the Ottomans intended not just to maintain pressure, but to collapse several key wall segments simultaneously through synchronized artillery strikes. By the final week of May, the Ottoman bombardment reached its peak. Cannons fired at the walls in near-continuous cycles, rotating crews to keep up pressure. The defenders, unable to fully repair nightly damage, began relying more heavily on internal barricades. Although these measures slowed Ottoman infantry, they signaled that the outer fortifications were approaching structural failure. Mehmed II convened strategic councils during this final week. Ottoman administrative records show discussions on the timing of the general assault, the coordination of land and naval forces, and the distribution of units along various attack points. The Janissaries, elite infantry troops, were positioned to deliver the final concentrated attack once irregular contingents softened defenses. Meanwhile, Ottoman ships in the Golden Horn increased nighttime patrols, preventing any possibility of external reinforcement. Venetian sources confirm that attempts to signal for aid received no response, as nearby Christian fleets were unable to mobilize in time. By May 27th to 28th, preparations for the final assault were complete. Troop formations, artillery patterns, and supply systems were arranged for sustained combat. The defenders, aware that a major attack was imminent, concentrated their limited forces at the Lycus Valley section. Internal correspondence from Byzantine commanders written shortly before the city's fall noted the intensity of damage in this region and acknowledged that maintaining structural coherence was becoming increasingly difficult. By the evening of May 28, 1453 AD, the preparatory phase of the siege concluded, as indicated across multiple sources, including the Venetian Niccolò Barbaro and the Ottoman chroniclers who described the final mobilization. With preparations completed, Mehmed II ordered a temporary halt to bombardment for several hours on the 28th, allowing rest for the artillery teams and infantry who would take part in the final assault. This halt is recorded in both Christian and Ottoman sources and marks the transition into the final stage of the conquest. Throughout the afternoon and evening of May 28th, Ottoman troops formed in their assigned positions. The front lines consisted of irregulars, known in contemporary writings as Azaps, who would initiate the assault. Behind them were the Timerate cavalry units fighting dismounted, and behind these, the Janissaries formed the final and most disciplined infantry wave. Ottoman administrative documents and later Ottoman histories confirm this layered deployment. On the Byzantine side, Emperor Constantine XI inspected the walls repeatedly during this same period. First-hand accounts describe him moving along the inner wall and through the sector near the Lycus Valley, where the greatest breaches had formed under sustained artillery bombardment. The emperor met with Giovanni Giustiniani, captain of the Genoese contingent, as noted by several eyewitness accounts, to confirm the defensive arrangements. Byzantines, Venetians, and Genoese were concentrated in this central sector because the structural damage from bombardment indicated where the main Ottoman attack would likely fall. Reports from the Venetian diarist Barbaro describe evening prayers and liturgical services held within the city on May 28th. While later romanticized narratives embellished these moments, the core details that residents gathered in major churches, including Hagia Sophia, for religious services, are supported by multiple documents. These gatherings were administrative and ceremonial in character, consistent with how Constantinople handled crisis events in previous centuries. Shortly after sunset, the defenders completed their final repairs for the night. Timber palisades, earthworks, barrels filled with stones, and makeshift barricades were set behind the major breaches. Greek, Genoese, and Venetian engineers worked under torchlight to reinforce weakened areas with available materials. The defensive positions inside the Lycus Valley were now multi-layered but narrow, reflecting the city's limited manpower and the extent of damage. Outside the walls, the Ottomans placed torches and lanterns to illuminate the terrain and guide troop movements. According to Chalca condyles, the entire Ottoman front line was visible due to the sheer number of lights marking unit formations. Ottoman officers, including divisional commanders and janissaries, moved along their ranks, issuing final instructions regarding ladders, shields, hooks, and other siege tools. As darkness deepened, watch rotations along the Constantinople walls tightened. Defenders expected the final attack imminently due to visible preparations. Surviving accounts mention that the defenders heard increased Ottoman activity, voices, drums, and commands, though visibility remained limited beyond the glare of Ottoman torches. Near midnight, the Ottoman artillery resumed firing in a pattern designed to weaken specific points before the infantry advanced. The bombardment at this stage was not intended to fully collapse new sections of the wall, but rather to maintain pressure and prevent defenders from reinforcing already weakened areas. Barbaro notes that cannon fire intensified suddenly after hours of silence, signaling the imminence of the final attack. The first Ottoman wave commenced shortly after midnight, likely between 1 o'clock and 1:30 a.m. on May 29, 1453 AD, according to converging Byzantine and Venetian testimonies. Irregular infantry, the Azaps, rushed forward along the main axis of attack in the Lycus Valley, supported by smaller attacks elsewhere to prevent defenders from reallocating forces. The Azaps carried basic shields, ladders, and light weapons, and their role was to overwhelm the defenders with numbers and fatigue rather than break through fortified positions directly. Reports from both Christian and Ottoman sources confirm that this initial wave engaged heavily but failed to achieve significant penetration. The defenders used their elevated position effectively, pushing down ladders, throwing stones and projectiles, and firing crossbows and hand cannons at close range. Despite the intensity of the first Ottoman push, the defenders held the walls and outer barricades, repelling multiple attempts to scale the damaged outer walls. The fighting during this initial wave lasted several hours. The defenders rotated positions where possible, using narrow walkways and the rebuilt sections behind the breaches to distribute manpower. Giustiniani is repeatedly mentioned in eyewitness accounts for directing movements within the central sector, and Emperor Constantine XI is recorded as present at multiple points, though the exact details of his movements during these hours vary slightly among sources. The second phase of the Ottoman assault began before dawn, consisting of the more organized provincial and Timeride infantry. These forces pressured the weakened central walls more effectively than the irregulars due to heavier armor and better training. Ottoman chronicles indicate that these units targeted not just the obvious breaches, but also adjacent areas to keep the defenders off balance. Despite increased pressure, the central defenses continued holding through this second wave. Defenders used prepared barricades behind the breaches, and the confined space forced Ottoman attackers into narrow, vulnerable entry routes. As recorded in multiple accounts, Ottoman casualties increased significantly during this second wave, and repeated ladder assaults failed due to the defenders' coordinated defense. Ottoman artillery continued periodic firing during this stage, aiming at the same central sector. These shots were coordinated with infantry attacks to prevent defenders from resting or repairing damage. Reports from the Venetian and Genoese survivors emphasized that although artillery fire was less frequent during the direct assaults, its continued use maintained structural instability in the walls. By the time the second wave withdrew temporarily, the defenders remained in control of the main breach, though the exhaustion of their limited forces increasingly became a factor. Byzantine sources written shortly after the fall described the cumulative effect of hours of combat and the ongoing strain of holding multiple defensive layers within a confined area. As dawn approached on May 29th, Mehmed II ordered the Janissaries forward for the final phase of the assault. This decision is documented in Ottoman chronicles and is corroborated by Venetian and Genoese accounts that describe the arrival of fresh, disciplined units. The Janissaries, trained and equipped differently from the irregulars and provincial troops, advanced in coordinated formations toward the central breach. At this point, the defenders were at their most vulnerable due to the fatigue accumulated through the earlier waves. The remaining reserves within the city were minimal, and although the forces of Constantine XI and Giustiniani remained in position, their ability to counter prolonged, disciplined pressure was limited. The Janissaries advanced with shields and formations designed to force their way into narrow breach points. Contemporary accounts describe how they pressed against the remaining outer wall sections and the inner barricades simultaneously. Their more disciplined approach allowed them to exploit openings created by earlier collapses in the outer walls and weaknesses in the improvised defenses behind them. During this critical stage, Giustiniani received a serious injury, documented variously as a wound to the arm, leg, or chest depending on the source, though all accounts agree the injury removed him from the ongoing fighting. His withdrawal from the front lines resulted in a noticeable shift in defensive coherence. Byzantine accounts note that his men, seeing their commander carried away, became less organized in holding their positions. The defenders continued resisting with the remaining Byzantine, Venetian, and Genoese troops filling the gaps left by Giustiniani's departure. Constantine XI remained in the central sector, directing defenses. Multiple accounts confirm the emperor's continued presence in the thick of fighting, though none detail his final moments precisely. Janissary units gained ground gradually. Their advance through the main breach at the St. Romanos sector created the first significant Ottoman foothold inside the defensive perimeter. Additional Ottoman troops exploited this foothold, pressing into the interior of the walls. At the same time, another breakthrough occurred at the Kirkoporta, a small gate located in the palace of the Porphyrogenitus sector. Accounts vary in detail, but sources, including Doukas, mentioned that a failure to secure this postern allowed Ottoman soldiers to enter the city from a secondary point. While not the decisive breach, this penetration increased Ottoman momentum inside the walls. The collapse of defensive organization accelerated once Janissary units established sustained access to the inner defenses. The defenders attempted to regroup along secondary barricades inside the city, but reduced manpower and simultaneous breaches made coordinated resistance increasingly difficult. Constantine XI, still active in the central sector, continued fighting with the remaining troops. Contemporary accounts differ on the specifics of his last moments, but the consistent elements across multiple sources state that he did not leave the walls once the Ottoman breakthrough became irreversible. His death occurred during this final defensive phase, though the exact details were unrecorded amid the chaos. By the morning of May 29, 1453 AD, the siege of Constantinople had reached its critical juncture. Ottoman forces, commanded by Sultan Mehmed II, had encircled the city for nearly 2 months, maintaining pressure through a combination of sustained artillery bombardment, coordinated infantry maneuvers, and naval blockades. Over this period, the Ottoman army had systematically exploited breaches in the Theodosian Walls, tested defensive positions, and weakened the morale and resources of the defenders through a relentless campaign. Contemporary sources, including Doukas and Leoniko's Chalcocondyles, indicate that the Ottoman army numbered between 80,000 and 100,000 troops, including elite janissaries, cavalry units, artillery crews, and auxiliary forces drawn from vassal states and allied contingents. The Byzantines, in contrast, maintained a defending force of approximately 7,000 to 10,000 combatants, comprising the city's garrison, armed citizenry, and mercenary contingents supplied by Genoa and Venice. The final assault began at dawn, coordinated to maximize the impact of prior bombardments and the accumulated fatigue of the defenders. Mehmed II divided his forces into multiple columns to attack simultaneously along different sectors of the city walls. The artillery units, including the massive bombard designed and operated by the Hungarian engineer Orban, had by this date created significant breaches in the outer walls. These breaches were the product of sustained fire over weeks, with stone projectiles weighing between 500 and 1,200 pounds each, capable of dislodging masonry and undermining structural integrity. Ottoman chroniclers and contemporary observers note that the noise of the bombardment and the constant vibration of the walls had created both material and psychological strain on the defenders, though historical accounts do not extend into conjecture about their emotional state. On the northern and western fronts, Ottoman infantry moved into position behind protective mantlets and shields, prepared to exploit the breaches as soon as an opportunity presented itself. Cavalry units were held in reserve to pursue retreating defenders and prevent organized counterattacks once entry was achieved. Naval forces had previously been prevented from entering the Golden Horn by the defensive chain, but small craft and armed boats supported landing operations where possible along the southern and eastern shores. The Ottomans employed scaling ladders, siege towers, and other contemporary assault implements, positioning them at the most vulnerable points identified through weeks of reconnaissance and artillery fire. The defense of the city relied on both static fortifications and strategic deployment of troops along critical sectors of the walls. The main breaches, concentrated along the land walls facing the European side of the city, were reinforced by archers, infantry armed with crossbows and spears, and artillery units operating smaller bombards. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese commander responsible for the defense of the northern sector, had been wounded earlier in the siege, reducing the coordination and effectiveness of his troops. Venetian and Byzantine garrisons held other sectors, maintaining watch over secondary breaches and potential infiltration points. The defenders had prepared the walls with countermeasures such as wooden stakes, obstacles, and firing positions to resist escalades and prevent the immediate entry of Ottoman forces. At approximately mid-morning, Ottoman forces began their coordinated advance across multiple sectors. Units concentrated their attacks on the largest breaches, while simultaneous probing attacks occurred along the secondary walls to fix defenders in place and prevent them from reinforcing the main points of assault. Historical records indicate that the Ottoman janissaries, trained as elite infantry and disciplined in siege operations, were among the first to enter through the weakened sections of the walls. Their entry points were supported by massed cannon fire, which continued to target defensive positions even as the assault progressed. Contemporary sources describe the intensity of the fighting as concentrated at key gates and breaches, particularly near the Mesotikian and the Kirkoporta sectors. Byzantine defenders attempted to repel the attackers using long spears, crossbows, and smaller artillery units, but the numerical advantage of the Ottomans quickly overwhelmed these efforts. Soldiers climbed ladders to scale walls, while others forced entry through broken sections of masonry. The coordination between Ottoman infantry, artillery, and cavalry, along with the simultaneous nature of the attacks, prevented the defenders from effectively regrouping or mounting sustained counterattacks at multiple points. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, commanding the defense personally, is documented as moving along the walls to direct the remaining troops and oversee critical sectors of the assault. Contemporary accounts confirm that he engaged in combat on the front lines, although sources vary on the precise circumstances of his death. No eyewitness record survives to detail the moment of his death with absolute certainty. However, his disappearance during the final breach is consistently noted in Byzantine and later historical sources, establishing that he fell defending the city. With the death of Constantine XI, the Byzantine imperial line, continuous since the foundation of Constantinople by Constantine I in 330 AD, was conclusively ended. By midday, the Ottoman forces had penetrated the inner walls at multiple points, effectively dividing the city into sectors that could no longer support coordinated defense. The Janissaries and supporting units secured the breaches, allowing cavalry and infantry to advance into the central urban areas. Historical records indicate that defensive strongpoints, such as the towers of the Theodosian Walls, were captured sequentially, further eroding organized resistance. The Golden Horn, still obstructed by the chain, prevented a complete naval assault, but Ottoman control of the land walls and access to smaller waterways enabled them to encircle and secure the remaining city sections. The entry of Ottoman forces into the city precipitated the collapse of any remaining organized Byzantine defense. Contemporary Venetian and Genoese accounts report that while some defenders attempted to regroup in the central districts, resistance was fragmented and ultimately ineffective. Ottoman troops systematically secured key structures, including gates, administrative buildings, and sections of the walls, solidifying control over the city. By late afternoon, Constantinople was fully under Ottoman control, marking the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire. In the immediate hours following the assault, Sultan Mehmed II entered the city, conducting an assessment of the captured territory. Historical records indicate that he ordered the preservation of certain structures, including major religious buildings such as Hagia Sophia, signaling a strategic intent to establish the city as a new imperial capital rather than to destroy it entirely. The Ottomans also organized the redistribution of surviving population groups, including captives and skilled workers, to support the establishment of governance and reconstruction efforts under Ottoman administration. The final assault on May 29, 1453 AD, represents a culmination of months of strategic preparation, sustained bombardment, and coordinated military execution. The Ottoman approach combined technological innovations in artillery, disciplined infantry operations, and logistical planning to overcome the numerical and geographic advantages of Constantinople's fortifications. The fall of the city is documented in multiple contemporary sources, including Daucus, Chalcocondyles, and Venetian dispatches, providing corroborated evidence of troop movements, breach locations, and the sequence of events that led to the city's capture. The historical significance of the assault is multifaceted. Militarily, it demonstrated the effectiveness of large-scale artillery in breaching previously impregnable fortifications, a turning point in siege warfare of the 15th century AD. Politically, it marked the complete annexation of Constantinople into the Ottoman Empire, establishing the city as the capital of a rising imperial power that would dominate southeastern Europe and Anatolia for centuries. The fall also signaled the end of the Byzantine state, eliminating the final remnant of the Roman imperial tradition in the East and reshaping the balance of power in the Eastern Mediterranean. The events of May 29, 1453 AD, are consistently corroborated in the historical record. Chroniclers note the precise coordination of Ottoman forces, the use of artillery to exploit structural vulnerabilities, the simultaneous attacks along multiple fronts, and the ultimate collapse of organized Byzantine defense. The documented absence of surviving Byzantine leadership following the death of Constantine XI confirms the definitive conclusion of the Byzantine political structure. No contemporary source attributes the outcome to legend, prophecy, or myth. The fall is explained entirely through observable military strategy, troop numbers, fortification conditions, and documented events. The capture of Constantinople on May 29, 1453 AD, marked a critical transformation in the political, social, and economic structure of the Eastern Mediterranean. With the death of Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos and the collapse of the organized Byzantine defense, Sultan Mehmed II and his forces assumed complete control over the city. The immediate aftermath was characterized by both systematic consolidation of authority and the establishment of administrative structures to integrate the city into the Ottoman Empire, ensuring it would function as the new imperial capital. The Ottomans entered Constantinople in an orderly and organized manner following the cessation of resistance. Contemporary sources, including the accounts of Doukas and the Venetian chronicler Niccolò Barbaro, document the systematic occupation of the city. Mehmed II immediately secured the major gates, the key walls, and the towers, ensuring that no further armed resistance could arise from isolated pockets of defenders. The placement of Ottoman troops throughout the city was strategic, designed to maintain control of essential thoroughfares, administrative centers, and points of strategic importance along the Bosporus, Golden Horn, and Sea of Marmara. One of the principal objectives of Mehmed II in the immediate aftermath was to establish political stability and continuity of governance. Historical records indicate that he appointed Ottoman officials to oversee the administration of Constantinople, including the management of taxation, maintenance of public order, and the regulation of commercial activity. These appointments were drawn both from experienced Ottoman administrators and from local functionaries who were retained to provide continuity of civic operations. Mehmed II's approach reflected the practical consideration of consolidating control while minimizing disruption to essential urban functions, including trade and port operations, which were crucial for the city's economic viability. The treatment of the city's population was subject to careful regulation. Venetian and Genoese records, as well as Ottoman chronicles, confirm that Mehmed II ordered a systematic registration of the inhabitants. This included both surviving Byzantine residents and the mercantile communities from across Europe. Those identified as skilled laborers, artisans, and merchants were integrated into the Ottoman administrative and economic system, either through direct employment or through regulated residency arrangements. Certain religious institutions, notably major churches, were initially preserved, reflecting Mehmed II's intention to incorporate the existing urban infrastructure into the administrative framework of the new imperial capital rather than to destroy it outright. Among these was the Cathedral of Hagia Sophia, which, though later converted into a mosque, was maintained as a major place of worship and cultural center from the outset of Ottoman control. The immediate period following the capture also involved the redistribution of property and the reassignment of civic and religious functions. Houses, commercial establishments, and other assets abandoned or vacated by fleeing residents were cataloged and repurposed under Ottoman authority. Contemporary chroniclers document that certain areas of the city, particularly those nearest the primary gates and sections of the walls, were designated for the quartering of Ottoman troops to maintain military oversight and rapid response capability in the event of localized unrest or external threat. The relocation and settlement of Ottoman military units served both defensive and administrative purposes, ensuring that the central authority could project power effectively throughout the city. Looting, while limited and controlled, occurred in accordance with the customary practices of contemporary siege warfare. Accounts from Venetian observers report that the seizure of movable wealth, arms, and supplies was conducted in a regulated manner, with portions allocated to the troops and significant items appropriated for the Sultan and his administration. Unlike previous sieges in which cities were devastated or destroyed entirely, Mehmed II's approach reflected a strategic intent to stabilize and repurpose the city as a functioning imperial capital, a policy consistent with his long-term objective of establishing Constantinople as the center of Ottoman governance and commerce. The Golden Horn, which had been previously blocked by a chain to prevent entry of the Ottoman fleet, was opened under the supervision of Mehmed II, allowing Ottoman naval units to occupy the port and control maritime access. Ships captured or stationed within the Golden Horn provided immediate logistical support for the continued consolidation of the city, as well as a strategic advantage over the Bosporus and the Sea of Marmara. Control of the harbor also ensured that the Ottoman administration could regulate trade and supply routes, both from the Black Sea and from the Mediterranean, reinforcing the economic viability of the newly conquered capital. The religious and cultural transition within Constantinople was methodically implemented. While Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, other churches, monasteries, and religious structures were preserved for continued use by the Orthodox Christian population, at least temporarily, in accordance with recorded Ottoman policy toward non-Muslim subjects. Religious authorities, including patriarchal representatives who survived the siege, were allowed to maintain certain ecclesiastical functions under the oversight of Ottoman officials. The documented approach reflects a measured policy aimed at minimizing disruption to civic and religious life while asserting Ottoman authority over the city's population and institutions. Population displacement was another immediate consequence of the conquest. Historical accounts confirm that portions of the surviving Byzantine population were resettled in different areas of the empire, including Anatolia and other provinces under Ottoman control. Skilled artisans, merchants, and other productive members of the urban population were deliberately retained within the city to facilitate reconstruction and economic recovery. Simultaneously, a portion of the population was enslaved or transported to support labor needs across the empire. This distribution served both economic and strategic objectives, consolidating Ottoman authority while ensuring the continued utility of human capital in the empire. The immediate aftermath also included the establishment of a legal and administrative framework for governing the city. Ottoman officials codified local regulations, taxes, and trade rules, integrating the city into the broader structure of the empire. Commercial activity, particularly in the Genoese and Venetian quarters, was monitored and taxed in accordance with Ottoman practice, ensuring that Constantinople could contribute effectively to state revenue. Administrative offices were staffed with personnel experienced in managing urban populations and trade networks, facilitating a smooth transition from Byzantine to Ottoman governance. Contemporary chroniclers also document the systematic organization of defense following the capture. While the Theodosian Walls had been breached, repairs and fortifications were undertaken under Ottoman supervision to secure the city against potential counterattacks or incursions by external forces. The presence of Ottoman garrisons along critical sectors ensured ongoing military security, and the strategic oversight of naval units in the Golden Horn and Bosporus maintained control over maritime approaches. These measures reflected a deliberate and historically documented approach to consolidating control rather than sporadic or ad hoc action. The immediate consolidation of Constantinople also had diplomatic and regional implications. News of the city's capture rapidly reached European powers, including Venice, Genoa, and the papacy. Venetian records indicate concern over the security of trade routes and the shifting balance of power in the eastern Mediterranean. Ottoman correspondence and official reports emphasized the orderly nature of the occupation and the integration of Constantinople into the administrative and commercial structures of the empire. These accounts collectively confirm that the immediate aftermath of May 29, 1453 AD, was characterized by methodical organization, strategic settlement of population, and establishment of governance rather than indiscriminate destruction. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453 AD had profound and long-lasting consequences for the political, economic, and cultural landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean, Southeastern Europe, and beyond. The immediate military and administrative outcomes of the siege, documented by contemporary sources such as Daucus, Leoniko's Chalcocondyles, Venetian dispatches, and Genoese records, provided the foundation for a transformation whose effects would reverberate for centuries. The integration of Constantinople into the Ottoman Empire initiated structural, economic, and geopolitical changes that altered the trajectory of both European and Middle Eastern history. Politically, the capture of Constantinople marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, a polity that had endured for over a millennium since the division of the Roman Empire in 395 AD. With the death of Constantine XI Palaiologos and the occupation of the city, the Byzantine imperial line, continuous since the establishment of Constantinople as the eastern capital by Constantine I in 330 AD, ceased to exist. No contemporary or subsequent record documents the restoration of Byzantine political authority. The administrative framework of the city and its territories was absorbed into the governance structures of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II, having secured the city, initiated administrative reforms to integrate Constantinople as the new Ottoman capital, later renamed Istanbul. Ottoman administrative documents and chronicles, including those preserved in the Topkapi Palace archives, confirm the establishment of provincial governance, the allocation of taxation responsibilities, and the strategic placement of Ottoman garrisons throughout the city and surrounding regions to maintain political and military control. The fall also precipitated significant changes in the balance of power in southeastern Europe. Before 1453 AD, the Byzantine Empire had acted as a buffer between the expanding Ottoman state and the Christian kingdoms of Europe, including Venice, Genoa, Hungary, and other states of the Holy Roman Empire. The removal of Byzantium as a political entity eliminated this buffer, exposing neighboring regions to direct Ottoman influence and military campaigns. Historical records indicate that following the capture of Constantinople, Ottoman expansion accelerated in the Balkans, including the consolidation of Thrace and advances into Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece. The absence of Byzantine territorial authority allowed Mehmed II to project power further into southeastern Europe, establishing the foundations of a centralized imperial administration that extended over both Anatolia and the Balkans. Economically, the fall of Constantinople disrupted long-established trade networks. The city had served as a critical hub for commerce between Europe and Asia, controlling access to key maritime and overland trade routes connecting the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Silk Road corridors. Genoese and Venetian trading communities, which had maintained quarters and commercial operations within Constantinople, faced immediate adjustments. Venetian state records and correspondence confirm that the disruption of grain shipments from the Black Sea, previously channeled through Constantinople, necessitated alternative arrangements and prompted concerns over the security of trade routes. The city's integration into the Ottoman economic system, including taxation and regulation of maritime commerce, shifted the flow of goods, influencing the trading patterns of European merchants and accelerating the search for alternative routes to Asia, contributing directly to the emergence of the Age of Exploration in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. The conquest also had a long-term impact on military technology and fortification strategy. The success of the Ottoman artillery, particularly the use of the massive bombard designed by Orban, demonstrated the effectiveness of large-scale cannon in breaching previously impregnable fortifications. Contemporary chronicles describe the progressive weakening of the Theodosian Walls over the course of the siege, culminating in the breaches exploited during the final assault on May 29, 1453 AD. The historical significance of this development is corroborated by European observers, including Venetian and Genoese envoys, who documented the vulnerability of stone fortifications to sustain cannon fire. This understanding influenced the design of future defensive structures across Europe, prompting the development of angled bastions, lower walls, and artillery-resistant fortifications in the late 15th and 16th centuries. Religious and cultural consequences were equally significant. Constantinople had served as the center of the Eastern Orthodox Church, with the ecumenical patriarchate operating under Byzantine authority for over a millennium. Following the Ottoman conquest, Mehmed II recognized the strategic value of preserving religious institutions to ensure social stability. Historical sources indicate that the patriarch was allowed to continue ecclesiastical functions under Ottoman oversight, and Orthodox Christian communities were incorporated into the Ottoman millet system, which regulated religious and civic life according to established law. Hagia Sophia, the city's most prominent religious edifice, was converted into a mosque, establishing a precedent for Ottoman integration of major religious structures into their governance system. Other churches were initially preserved, facilitating continuity of Orthodox religious practice under the new regime. Demographic changes ensued as a direct consequence of the conquest. Contemporary records, including Venetian accounts and Ottoman chronicles, indicate that portions of the surviving Byzantine population were resettled to Anatolia and other regions under Ottoman control, both as a means of labor utilization and to prevent concentrated opposition within Constantinople. Skilled artisans, merchants, and administrators were deliberately retained within the city to maintain economic productivity and facilitate reconstruction, while others were enslaved or transported to support labor and military requirements elsewhere in the empire. This redistribution reflects a documented Ottoman policy of population management and economic integration following the conquest of major urban centers. The fall of Constantinople also produced significant intellectual and cultural effects beyond the immediate region. The migration of Byzantine scholars to Western Europe, often carrying classical manuscripts and knowledge of the Greek language and literature, contributed to the Renaissance. Venetian, Genoese, and other European records document the movement of these scholars, whose arrival in Italian city-states facilitated the dissemination of classical knowledge, particularly in philosophy, mathematics, and science. While these movements were secondary consequences rather than the immediate result of the siege, they are historically documented outcomes tied directly to the collapse of Byzantine political authority in 1453 AD. International diplomatic responses to the fall were immediate. Venice and Genoa, heavily invested in maritime trade with Constantinople, undertook measures to protect remaining commercial interests in the eastern Mediterranean. Hungarian and other Central European records indicate that the Ottoman capture of Constantinople intensified concerns over regional security, prompting the mobilization of forces and fortification of border territories. The papacy, while largely unable to influence the course of events, directly documented the conquest extensively and attempted to rally European states to consider coordinated defense or counter-expeditions, though these efforts were limited in effectiveness due to political fragmentation and geographic distance. From a broader historical perspective, the fall of Constantinople marks a pivotal turning point in the transition from the medieval period to the early modern era. Politically, it ended a millennium-long imperial tradition. Economically, it reshaped trade routes and inspired maritime exploration. Militarily, it demonstrated the transformative impact of artillery on fortified cities. And culturally, it facilitated the transfer of knowledge to Western Europe. The continuous documentation of these outcomes in contemporary letters, chronicles, and administrative records establishes a clear causal relationship between the capture of Constantinople and subsequent historical developments in Europe, Anatolia, and the Eastern Mediterranean. The Ottoman consolidation of Constantinople laid the groundwork for its role as the center of a major imperial state. Mehmed II's reforms included the reorganization of taxation, urban planning, and military oversight, as recorded in Ottoman administrative registers. Strategic repopulation and the maintenance of commercial infrastructure allowed the city to recover relatively quickly as a functioning metropolis. The documentation of trade flows, population registers, and the assignment of administrative officials demonstrates the efficiency and purposefulness of this process, highlighting the city's transformation from a besieged Byzantine stronghold to the administrative and economic heart of the Ottoman Empire. The historiography of the fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453 AD relies heavily on a collection of contemporary and near-contemporary sources that provide detailed documentation of the siege, the final assault, and the immediate aftermath. These sources, drawn from Byzantine, Ottoman, Venetian, and Genoese records, allow for a rigorous reconstruction of the events leading to the collapse of the Byzantine Empire while excluding legend, myth, or later embellishments. Examining these sources reveals both the methods employed by the Ottoman forces and the defensive strategies of the Byzantines, as well as verifying key dates, troop numbers, and administrative measures following the city's capture. Byzantine chroniclers offer primary insights into the internal perspective of the besieged city. Among these, Doukas, a historian and court official writing in the decades immediately following the fall, provides a systematic account of the military, political, and civic dimensions of the siege. His work includes precise chronological details identifying the beginning of the siege on April 6, 1453 AD and the date of the final assault on May 29, 1453 AD, along with observations on troop dispositions, artillery use, and the key sectors of the Theodosian Walls. Doukas records the death of Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos during the final defense, corroborating other Byzantine and foreign accounts regarding the definitive end of Byzantine imperial authority. Leonikos Chalkokondyles, a Greek historian active in the latter half of the 15th century AD, provides further documentation based on both personal experience and oral testimonies collected shortly after the siege. His work emphasizes the organization and numerical strength of the Ottoman army, detailing Sultan Mehmed II's strategic planning, the use of artillery, and the coordination of multi-front assaults. Chalkokondyles records that Ottoman forces numbered approximately 80,000 to 100,000 troops, including janissaries, cavalry units, and auxiliary contingents from vassal states, while the defenders comprised roughly 7,000 to 10,000 soldiers, supplemented by Genoese and Venetian mercenaries. These figures are corroborated by Venetian and Genoese records, which provide independent verification of the military scale and composition of the combatants. Venetian and Genoese sources are particularly valuable for documenting the involvement of Western mercenary forces and the broader strategic context of the siege. Niccolò Barbaro, a Venetian physician and chronicler present in Constantinople during the siege, provides day-to-day records of military events, including artillery bombardments, assaults on breaches, and the activities of the Genoese contingent led by Giovanni Giustiniani. Barbaro's account includes detailed observations on the implementation of defensive measures, such as the blocking of the Golden Horn with a massive chain, the positioning of archers and infantry along critical sections of the Theodosian Walls, and the repair of damaged fortifications under continuous bombardment. The Venetian chronicler's notes also document the aftermath, including the orderly occupation of the city by Ottoman forces and the preservation of selected religious and civic structures. Genoese records provide additional corroboration, particularly regarding the defensive contributions and losses of the Genoese mercenaries. These sources document Giustiniani's leadership on the northern walls and note his wounding before the final assault, which significantly reduced the effectiveness of the defense in that sector. The records indicate that despite their commitment, the numerical superiority and technological advantages of the Ottoman forces overwhelmed the defenders, leading to the final breach and capture of the city on May 29, 1453 AD. The consistency between Venetian and Genoese accounts allows historians to cross-verify events and establish a coherent narrative of the siege. Ottoman sources, including chronicles written under Mehmed II's patronage, such as Tursun Beg and Kritovalos, provide complementary perspectives on the siege and capture of Constantinople. These accounts document the preparation of the Ottoman army, including the assembly of siege artillery, recruitment of engineers, and organization of supply lines, beginning shortly after Mehmed II's ascension in 1451 AD. Ottoman chroniclers confirm the systematic application of artillery bombardment over several weeks, the strategic positioning of troops to exploit breaches in the walls, and the coordination of simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts. They also detail the logistical planning for the occupation of Constantinople, including the registration of residents, the assignment of officials, and the management of military and civilian functions within the city following its capture. Quantitative data from these sources provide concrete evidence of siege operations. For example, the massive cannon constructed by Orban is documented to have fired stone projectiles weighing between 500 and 1,200 pounds, capable of dislodging sections of the Theodosian Walls. Multiple sources confirm that these bombardments continued daily from the beginning of April 1453 AD until the final assault on May 29, 1453 AD, creating breaches exploited by Ottoman infantry. Contemporary accounts of troop movements, breach locations, and the timing of coordinated attacks allow historians to reconstruct a precise sequence of events, free from speculation or legend. Administrative and economic measures taken immediately after the fall are also well documented. Ottoman records confirm Mehmed II's appointment of officials to oversee taxation, trade, and military security, as well as the strategic resettlement of residents. Venetian and Genoese reports corroborate the preservation of certain churches, including Hagia Sophia, at least initially, and note the orderly quartering of troops to maintain control over key city districts. These contemporaneous records collectively demonstrate that the conquest was executed with strategic planning and administrative foresight, rather than arbitrary destruction, underscoring the systematic nature of Ottoman consolidation. Historians have relied on these sources to verify specific details of the siege and aftermath, including the start date of the siege, April 6, 1453 AD, the duration of the bombardment, the sequence of breaches and assaults on the walls, and the ultimate capture of Constantinople on May 29, 1453 AD. Comparative analysis of Byzantine, Venetian, Genoese, and Ottoman sources has allowed the reconciliation of minor discrepancies, such as variations in reported troop numbers or timing of specific skirmishes, while retaining the core documented facts. This cross-referencing ensures a high degree of historical accuracy in reconstructing events. Importantly, these sources exclude legendary or mythological explanations for the fall, such as prophecies, divine intervention, or supernatural causes. Contemporary chroniclers consistently attribute the outcome to observable military factors: the superior organization, numbers, and artillery technology of the Ottoman forces, the physical condition and limitations of the Theodosian Walls after sustained bombardment, and the reduced effectiveness of Byzantine leadership due to casualties and limited reinforcements. No primary source attributes the city's fall to non-material causes, allowing a purely empirical reconstruction of events. Secondary sources, compiled from these primary documents, further enhance historical understanding. Later historians, including Stephen Runciman and Donald Nickel, analyzed the siege using contemporary records, providing context on the broader political, economic, and cultural implications of the fall while remaining anchored to documented evidence. These analyses draw on preserved letters, ambassadorial reports, and Ottoman administrative records to interpret the immediate and long-term outcomes without introducing unverified legend or speculation. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453 AD, represents a historically documented watershed moment, concluding the Byzantine Empire and inaugurating a new era under the Ottoman Empire. Contemporary and near-contemporary sources provide detailed evidence for understanding both the immediate and long-term consequences of the conquest, establishing the event as a central turning point in late medieval and early modern history. The consolidation of Constantinople under Mehmed II and the death of Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos marked not only the collapse of the last remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire, but also the redefinition of political, military, economic, and cultural structures in southeastern Europe and the eastern Mediterranean. Politically, the fall of Constantinople conclusively ended a continuous imperial authority dating from 330 AD, when Constantine I established the city as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Doukas, Leonikos Chalkokondyles, and other Byzantine sources confirm that with Constantine II's death during the final assault, no successor was installed, and imperial administration ceased to exist. The Ottoman Empire, under Mehmed II, immediately assumed control, appointing officials to manage taxation, trade, civic governance, and military security. Archival Ottoman records demonstrate that Mehmed II's administration integrated Constantinople into a centralized governance framework, establishing provincial structures and maintaining order while gradually transforming the city into the Ottoman imperial capital, later known as Istanbul. This political consolidation allowed the Ottomans to project power across Anatolia, the Balkans, and the wider Eastern Mediterranean, creating a new regional hierarchy that replaced centuries of Byzantine hegemony. The military implications of the fall were both immediate and enduring. The siege illustrated the effective use of heavy artillery, a relatively novel technological development in 1453 AD, to overcome long-standing fortifications. Orban's massive cannon, documented in both Byzantine and Ottoman chronicles, breached sections of the Theodosian Walls, demonstrating that even centuries-old defensive systems could be rendered obsolete by coordinated artillery and infantry tactics. Venetian and Genoese observers emphasized the unprecedented scale of cannon deployment and the organized integration of artillery into siege operations. Subsequent European military engineering, including the development of bastion fortifications and artillery-resistant defensive structures, drew upon these observations, indicating the broader strategic impact of the siege beyond the immediate region. Economically, the fall of Constantinople disrupted existing trade networks connecting Europe, Anatolia, and Asia. The city had functioned as a nexus for the movement of goods, including grain from the Black Sea, textiles, and luxury commodities. Venetian and Genoese records detail the interruption of trade, prompting adjustments in commercial practices and spurring exploration for alternative routes to Asia. This disruption is documented as a contributing factor to the age of exploration in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, as European powers sought direct access to Asian markets, circumventing Ottoman-controlled Constantinople and other eastern Mediterranean ports. Ottoman administrative documents confirm the immediate establishment of taxation and regulation mechanisms to incorporate Constantinople into the empire's economic system, ensuring the flow of revenue and the stability of commercial activity under the new regime. Religious and cultural structures were profoundly affected. The Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, central to Eastern Orthodox Christianity, was retained under Ottoman oversight, establishing the foundation for the millet system, which governed religious communities within the empire. Hagia Sophia, historically the cathedral of the Byzantine emperors, was converted into a mosque, demonstrating a symbolic and practical integration of the city into Ottoman political and religious life. Other churches and religious institutions were preserved temporarily, providing continuity for the Orthodox population and facilitating social stability. Contemporary chroniclers, including Ottoman and Venetian sources, document these measures, illustrating that the Ottomans aimed to integrate rather than immediately dismantle the city's social and religious structures, reflecting a pragmatic approach to governance. Demographically, the fall of Constantinople initiated a process of population redistribution and resettlement. Venetian and Ottoman records confirm that segments of the surviving Byzantine population were relocated within Anatolia or employed to support labor and administrative needs across the empire. Skilled artisans and merchants were deliberately retained in the city to maintain productive capacity, while portions of the population were enslaved or moved as part of the Ottoman military and economic strategy. These policies ensured the rapid stabilization of the city's population and contributed to the emergence of a functional urban center under Ottoman control. The structured approach to population management, documented in primary sources, demonstrates that the conquest was followed by systematic planning rather than chaotic displacement. Intellectually and culturally, the fall had a notable impact on the transmission of classical knowledge. Byzantine scholars who fled the city carried manuscripts and Greek learning to Western Europe. Venetian, Genoese, and other European sources document the arrival of these scholars in Italian city-states, particularly Florence and Venice, where they contributed to the dissemination of classical philosophy, science, and literature. This migration directly facilitated the Renaissance, bridging the intellectual traditions of the Byzantine world with emerging European humanist thought. The event, therefore, had long-term cultural and scholarly consequences, documented through the movement of texts and the establishment of educational networks that preserved and expanded classical knowledge. The fall also initiated a geopolitical realignment in the Eastern Mediterranean and Europe. European states recognized the vulnerability created by the absence of Byzantine control, prompting defensive measures along the Danube, Adriatic, and Aegean regions. The Venetian Republic and the papacy corresponded extensively regarding military and commercial adjustments in response to Ottoman consolidation, as documented in diplomatic letters and ambassadorial reports. The capture of Constantinople facilitated the expansion of Ottoman influence into the Balkans, including regions of Greece, Thrace, and Bulgaria, establishing a territorial base from which successive campaigns could be launched. The city's strategic location on the Bosporus, documented by both Byzantine and Ottoman sources, enabled control over maritime and overland trade routes, enhancing the Ottoman Empire's economic and military reach. Historically, the legacy of May 29, 1453 AD is grounded in empirical evidence. The documentation of siege operations, military organization, administrative measures, and population management provides a continuous narrative from the pre-siege conditions to the transformation of Constantinople under Ottoman rule. Contemporary sources, including Doukas, Chalcocondyles, Barbaro, and Ottoman chroniclers, enable historians to reconstruct events with precise chronological continuity. These sources, corroborated by Venetian, Genoese, and other European accounts, allow for verification of troop numbers, artillery deployment, breach locations, and the sequence of attacks. Administrative records following the conquest detail the integration of trade, taxation, and civic governance, confirming the methodical approach of Mehmed II in establishing long-term control. The fall of Constantinople, therefore, represents not only the military collapse of a city, but the conclusion of a millennium-long imperial structure and the establishment of a new political, economic, and cultural order. The event exemplifies the transformative potential of siege warfare, the strategic utility of artillery, and the significance of administrative foresight in consolidating newly conquered territories. Its documented consequences extend from regional geopolitical realignment and commercial disruption to intellectual migration and the dissemination of classical knowledge, illustrating the multifaceted impact of May 29, 1453 AD, on the historical trajectory of Europe and the Near East. In the final assessment, the legacy of the fall of Constantinople is substantiated by continuous, documented evidence rather than myth or legend. Every phase, from Mehmed II's preparations in 1451 AD to the capture and subsequent integration of the city, is recorded in contemporary letters, chronicles, and administrative archives. The convergence of Byzantine, Ottoman, Venetian, and Genoese sources ensures historical accuracy and allows for a coherent narrative of the events and consequences. This evidence establishes May 29, 1453 AD as a definitive historical milestone, marking the end of Byzantine sovereignty, the rise of Ottoman supremacy, and the beginning of a new era in global history.